And share my screen. And maximize. Awesome. Now we can do something here. Okay, just to review where we left off last week, we're working through some ideas we've been working with for a long time. And again, it goes back to the 4 beast kingdoms and the characteristics of those beast kingdoms. And in this particular case, we've kind of got into Daniel a little bit because, of course, Daniel describes these beast kingdoms to us long before John's revelation. And so as we're looking at the book of Revelation, we always want to refer back to what Daniel saw and what was explained to him to help us understand exactly what John might be seeing. And of course, will there be little differences? Probably, but we've talked about that before. That's how prophecy works. It's never exactly the same as it was explained before because there's more to be understood. And through this, maybe a second event or a third event or so forth, prophecy can be fulfilled many times. He will show you a different aspect that he didn't reveal to you before. So you look at similarities, but you don't really look for them to be identical in explanation. So we don't expect John's revelation to be identical to Daniel's because we expect John's revelation to clarify Daniel's. Now, does it completely unseal everything where we understand every word of it? If we do, we're, I don't know, pretty smart people, but I'm not that smart. So we're still hunting for clues. We're still putting scriptures together to help us get a handle on this beast. So we have the first beast kingdom. Remember the serpent or the crocodile of the Nile, the dragon, was based, of course, in the water. He was based in the river. And the river will be a topic that comes up, if not tonight, definitely within the next week or two. Because what John sees is he sees the beast coming out of the water. We know that has a specific connotation to it. And then we want to go look at these 4 angels and how one of these angels pours out, he blows the trumpet, and then this star wormwood, it's like a burning torch, and then it falls into the rivers and the springs, and it has a specific effect on the rivers and the springs. So we want to take a look at that very specifically and see, is there more to know here? Because it falls in a specific place. Again, remember our guideline. If the creature, if the beast comes out of the water, then it's weakened and its time is limited, its time is short. If the beast comes out of the forest, or if it comes out of the wilderness, these are equivalent expressions in terms of prophecy. These are both land-based creatures, land-based beasts. And we saw how Nebuchadnezzar, he had to come through a wilderness in order to attack Jerusalem. So he was a land-based beast creature, and therefore he had incredible strength. And so did the Medes and the Persians. So did the Greeks. So did Rome. Rome was actually called the boar of the pig, the boar of the forest. And when you see these creatures coming out of the forest, coming out of the wilderness, they're incredibly strong. But if you see them coming up out of the water, then that's your hint that, yes, this is a powerful beast, but it's very quickly going to weaken and die. So if you see the creature come out of the water, like we do in John's revelation, it might seem terrifying, but it's actually good news, because we know that this creature will not have the lifespan of, say, the kingdoms of Babylon, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, which their systems exist with us to this day. Last week, we looked at the leopard spots. and those organizations, those confederations, those systems that it has used to infect the entire earth, and to start by trying to charm you into it. If he can't charm you into it, he'll coerce you into it. If he can't coerce you into it, that's when the iron teeth come out, the iron teeth of the lion. Those will come out. So it's got the sharp teeth of the lion, but they're iron because it's got the strength of Rome behind it. Okay, so that's just a quickie review. You've got the Babylonian lion, you've got the Persian bear, you've got the Greek leopard, and last week the spots were the thing. Trying to not only draw you into their organizations, but demonstrating to you that these spots don't change. That was the scripture we read. Can the leopard change its spots? No, it can't. And that's where assimilation comes in. Even though it's spread over the earth, that's why the beast has the body of the leopard. The spots are the systems that are embedded within Greece, they remain. Instead of being transformed by the nations that they're in, instead what they do is transform the nations. So it's a very dangerous thing. Greece was, that was one of the big things of the Hellenistic period, is how the Greeks were able to influence the Jews. And that's why you hear about the Hellenistic Jews and why the disciples were all bent out of shape, because the Greek Jews were coming. They had acquired some of the spots of the Greek kingdom, its philosophy, especially. There was, of course, we're not told specifically what Yeshua's disciples were concerned about, but we know that as we're reading sources like Philo and so forth, that we get the idea of how much the Hellenistic Jews had been influenced by these Greek systems, and so much so that they were still being referred to as Hellenized during the Empire of Rome, which was the next beast. That tells you the leopard did not change its spots. The leopard spots were still part of Rome, because remember, Rome is that conglomerate beast, and it has the body of the leopard, but then it's going to have the teeth, the head of the lion. It's going to have the paws of the bear. So it's exceedingly terrifying, Daniel says. So in the Song of Songs, this is the verse we've been working with. And it says, I must arise now and go around in the city and in the streets and in the public squares. I must seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but did not find him. Right, so we looked at how this is a fractal. This is kind of a telescope type of prophecy. And we looked at Moses as being one of the prototypes here, that the Israelites were looking for Moses. They were looking for a deliverer. We looked at the beloved. What is she doing? She's walking around the city of Jerusalem, and until she runs into the Sovavim, the watchmen of the night, who understand the night watches, those who we would identify with people who know the times of the feasts, especially. Once she finds them, then instantly she finds her beloved. When Israel finds Moses, she finds Passover. And so we're looking at this messianic type and different people in scripture. In this particular one we want to look at, it's going to be associated with Daniel, who again interprets these visions of not just the image of the beast that King Nebuchadnezzar had, but also the visions of his own, where the kingdoms of the beast, which is a man, the first time we see it, it's the image of a man. But when Daniel sees it, he sees it in terms of the beasts. So these individual gold, silver, bronze, iron kingdoms, Daniel sees them as creatures. And so his understanding, his help to the Jews in the exile in Babylon and then in Medo-Persia, he was, because see, he outlasted beast kingdoms. You don't see that often in one person because typically they last so long. But for Daniel, he's remained active through these kingdoms of Babylon, then Medes and Persians, and continued to be very prominent among those particular kingdoms. And so his role was as an encourager. And at some point, the sages say that the Jews became very discouraged in exile in Babylon because they felt like, well, the years have been calculated, and now the years of the 70 years have passed and we've still not been redeemed. Maybe we're not going to be redeemed, which is considered a blasphemy. This is what the kings of these kingdoms want us to think. Look at how much time has passed. Your Redeemer has not yet come. I think you're wasting your time. Just go ahead and buy into our systems, and we will offer you everything you're looking for in your Redeemer. We'll give you health care. We'll give you food. We'll give you a military to protect you. We'll give you social services. We'll give you games to distract you. We'll give you every system we have at our disposal. Just buy into it and lean upon it and put your faith in that, and quit putting your faith in this God who says he's going to come and redeem you and rescue you. So Daniel is seen as the one that the Jews are seeking in the exile in Babylon. And he is the one, they say, who straightened out the calculation. He said, bring me the scroll of Jeremiah. He went through it very carefully, and he said, you've miscalculated. You've miscalculated up to 18 years because you started your count too soon. And so he recalculates for them and lets them know that their Redeemer is still coming. And so there's kind of a double entendre here in this verse as it pertains to Daniel, because they're seeking their beloved. They can't find him because they don't understand that the days of exile have not yet been fulfilled. But if we look at the incident with Daniel in the lion's den, what's happening here? There was kind of a fear because, there was a point where Moses disappeared. They say he took his wife and his sons back to Yitro. Daniel disappears here. Well, he disappears twice. He disappears when the image of the beast is first set up by King Nebuchadnezzar. The story is about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's not about Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. And so anybody seeking guidance on the situation, where was Daniel? And it's the subject of lots of interesting discussions, of course, in the Midrash. But where was he? We don't know for sure because scripture doesn't tell us. In this long night, and remember the night represents the exile, this period of time when you're searching for the one whom your soul loves. You've been put into exile and you're having difficulty finding him. The night that Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, where is he? Nobody knows, because remember, they put the rock over the lion's den. And so if they were going around the city seeking him, they were not going to find him because he had been thrown in to the jaws of the lion. And it's only going to be in the next morning, when the stone is rolled away from the den, that they're going to be able to find the one, the Jews are going to be able to find the one whom their soul loves in exile. Right? So they're saying there's several hints right here that make you think of the exile. Okay, so let's see. I don't think we need to go over that again. So we're in lesson 97. Okay, let me fix this where I can see it. Okay, so I've told you before, if you're reading a prophecy, and we practiced it on Yeshua's prophecy about his footsteps when he would return, how it looked like there was a shift where we could look at part of what he was saying, that era again about where the blood would be up to the horses' bridles, that had been fulfilled. that those who were in Judea, they needed to flee to the mountains and so forth, and don't stay in the city. Well, that particular part of his prophecy was fulfilled in 135 AD, when the last holdouts against Rome were massacred in Beitar. But then Yeshua kind of shifts in his prophecy, where he says, and then there's going to be these great signs in the heavens, and this and this and this. And then we get the idea that he's talking about a second period of prophecy. He just doesn't bother to tell us there's going to be maybe 2,000 years between these two things. He just says then. And so in terms of prophecy, that's your clue. If you see the word then entertain the idea you're possibly reading about two time periods that are separated by more than a period and a capital letter in English, right? There's not a lot of parchment to work with. And so you're given clues, right? So if his prophecy has two fulfillments, right, then we have one that really isn't sealed, but it's already recorded in history. We know these Roman emperors, they overflowed, they ruled for centuries, and they moved those boundaries beyond anything any previous beast kingdom had ruled. And they did it through arrogance. They did it through cunning. They used those assimilation techniques of the Greeks. They especially used the iron teeth. Remember the lion with the iron teeth? By this time, we're literally in the Iron Age. We've moved from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. And so they're using these weapons forged of iron to enforce submission. So remember, they do it by charm, if they can, cunning. They do it by coercion, if that doesn't work. And if coercion doesn't work, then they enforce submission with iron. And in the message to Thyatira and Revelation, Yeshua talks about during his kingdom, he will rule with a rod of iron. So it's regime change. The kingdom, the iron kingdoms, the daughters of Rome, who have used these techniques, culminating in the rod of iron, the teeth of iron, to enforce submission if they can't charm you into it or coerce you into it. Then Yeshua says the tables are going to be turned, and instead they will be subdued with a rod of iron. Right? So let's see. I think probably the prophecy was on the previous section. That's okay. But we've got the Romans who came to power after the wrongdoers had run their course, right? And this was part of Daniel's prophecy. He talks about the wrongdoers, that certain things are going to happen. He talks about the treacherous dealer and the wrongdoers. So the sages are going to offer two interpretations of these particular people. They're going to say it goes back to the bronze or the leopard kingdom of the Greeks, who seduced the Jews into their system. Was there assimilation in Babylon? Yes, but definitely not to the degree as it was with the Greeks. And so, as it turned out, if you're reading about the time of the Maccabees, these Hellenistic Jews turned out to be as much an enemy as, say, Antiochus Epiphanes, who the story of Hanukkah is all about. The Romans used their conscripted military, which is really odd because, like I think I said this last week, Rome didn't really have enough soldiers to conquer and hold all the territory that they had. So they were constantly conscripting soldiers from the nations or the people groups that they would subdue. So they're going to put foreign soldiers into harness, so to speak, to do the heavy lifting of the military campaigns. And they offered perks for this. Remember that first they want to charm you into it if they can. And if you can't be charmed into it, you'll be coerced into it. And then you'll be forced into it. You'll become human cannon fodder, so to speak. But they did offer some perks to foreign soldiers who would serve and do the dirty work for them. They might adopt them. They would adopt grown men. If you've ever watched, which movie was it? Ben-Hur, the old one with Charlton Heston. If you've ever watched Ben-Hur, you've seen an example. You perform well, you do a good job, and they might adopt you. They might offer you citizenship. They might offer you retirement benefits. So they used everything at their disposal to incorporate the people groups around them and to build that empire that way. So they're using the best techniques of the Greeks. I didn't rhyme on purpose. And this allowed them to expand their empire, even up into Great Britain today. You can go see Hadrian's Wall. You can still go see, there's a beautiful Roman complex, I believe in Bath, England, that we went to see when I was in school. We took a little side trip, just the elaborate baths of the Romans, the architecture and so forth, very luxurious, even that far away from Rome. At any rate, this fourth kingdom, Rome, is, we would say, legally responsible for the Prince of Princes crucifixion. Daniel talks about the Prince of Princes. Rome opposed Yeshua. It doesn't matter how many times you wash your hand, the verdict is the verdict. And so even up to 100 years after Yeshua was crucified, we have historical records that says the Romans kept tabs on Yeshua's family up in the Galilee. And there were a couple of descendants from his family, I don't know, country cousins, you might call them. They actually had them shipped to Rome to interrogate them, to find out if they had any Messianic aspirations. And they're like, no, we're just farmers. We don't have any Messianic aspirations. And so, yes, the story sometimes is that the Romans really didn't want to crucify Yeshua, but they really did, because just like with the Bar Kokhba revolt that ended it all, they had messiahs rise up even before Yeshua that were causing rebellion, insurrection, assassinations, the zealots and so forth. And so they opposed Yeshua when he began behaving as a Messiah, and he also had the bloodline. He was legally qualified to sit on the throne of Judah and Israel. If you check his pedigree and trace that down there, which I don't want to take time to do, but if you do that research work, remember there was one line that had forfeited the throne. It's like, one of your offspring will never sit on the throne again. But there was another line of David, and it's through this other line that Yeshua was descended from through his mother. And so he or his brothers born of Miriam, any of them could have legitimately sat on the throne of Israel. Right? And then you've got Rome, who's going to send the Jews, i.e. Israel, into their final exile. They're going to destroy the holy people as a nation. Remember, it was at Beitar, they lost the ability to self-govern for almost 2,000 years. Not until 1948 did they win back the ability to self-govern. Right, so we covered that. But we also know that Rome was considered the boar from the forest. If you look at the literature, Rome is definitely identified as the boar from the forest that we read about in Psalm 80:13. It says, a boar from the forest eats it away, and whatever moves in the field feeds on it. Feeds on what? Feeds on the prey of Judah, feeds on the prey of Israel. Why were they so strong? Why was Rome so strong? They say it's because specifically he emerged from the forest. And if you remember, we went over this history. We traced the Pharaoh, Necho, the crocodile of the Nile, the serpent. He comes out of the Nile. He goes all the way up to the Euphrates and challenges Babylon and loses. And from that point on, he's pretty much chased back to Egypt. Egypt never had the same power again. They never ruled with the power that they had enjoyed up to that point. Why? Because the serpent left the water. But his authority was passed on to the first beast kingdom, which was Babylon, the lion. And so that's how you trace that authority of the serpent down through the beast kingdoms. But Rome, it says, emerged from the forest. These beast kingdoms that the crocodile spawned, they were much stronger beasts than Egypt because they were land-based. That's the prophetic principle here. What fueled Rome? What made them so strong that they could eat up Israel and anything that moved in Judah? It was fueled by Israel's idolatry. And we traced it all the way back to King Solomon. And so when King Solomon married the daughter of Pharaoh, that sowed the seeds of Rome at that point. Because remember, either when Israel is on the rise, the beast descends. When Israel descends spiritually, the beast arises. And it may take a long time. It did. But they're never in balance. It's not a principle that stays in balance. If one's going up, the other one's going down. So this incredible world-conquering power of Babylon, and then as it's passed down through the Medes, the Persians, Greek, and finally Rome, we can see why their power was so incredible. They were considered a beast from the forest. But John sees the vision of the beast emerging from the sea. And then we have this last battle, right? We have this last red beast, again, representing Rome, the Roman systems. He is going to battle Messiah the Prince. But because he came out of the sea, we know he's greatly weakened, just like Pharaoh was, and he will soon die, just like any other aquatic creature that comes out of the sea and crawls up on the land. So his opposition to Messiah the Prince will be defeated. And I put some notes down here, if you notice on the asterisk, because we're talking about the boar from the forest here. I listed some references here so you could do some more reading. Amos 3:4, 2 Kings 2:23, 2 Samuel 18:8, Psalm 104:20, Isaiah 56:9, Micah 3:12. The incident where the she-bears come out of the forest and attack the young men who were taunting Elisha, that's significant prophetically, because if you're talking about the bear, there's an identity there. There's a prophetic identity there. So here's what Jeremiah 5:6 says. It says, therefore, a lion from the forest will kill them. Right? Remember, Jeremiah is prophesying to the Jews. He's telling them that Babylon is going to destroy Jerusalem. They're going to destroy the temple, and they're going to be taken into exile for 70 years. That's the context of Jeremiah. So here in Jeremiah 5:6, he doesn't just predict a lion of Babylon. He specifies, he says, a lion from the forest will kill them. So that he's talking about the kingdom of Babylon here. And he's talking about how much power Babylon will have because it is a lion from the forest. It's land-based. Just like Rome was considered the boar from the forest, incredible power and strength. And this is what Jeremiah is predicting. A lion from the forest will kill them. Babylon will be very strong. It won't weaken and die before it takes you captive. And then it kind of switches here. It says, a wolf of the desert will destroy them. A leopard is watching their cities. Everyone who goes out of them will be torn in pieces because of their wrongdoings are many. Their apostasies are numerous. Right? So before we kind of break that down, just think about Daniel in the lion's den. If the lion represents Babylon, by this point, the kingdom of Babylon has passed, right? Nebuchadnezzar has died. He's passed on. The kingdom of Babylon has been defeated by the Medes, and King Darius is using Daniel in administration. He's still holding the same high position that he enjoyed with Babylon. Now he's enjoying with the Medes and will with the Persians. But in this case, this lion of the forest, because remember, they're inheriting from Babylon. The beast kingdoms hand down from one to the next. So even though at this point you're technically in a bear kingdom, the bear is still going to have the characteristics of the lion, because remember, you've got bear paws for strength, but the beast still has the face and the teeth of a lion. So Babylon didn't kill Daniel. The lions of the lion's den did not kill Daniel. So it suggests something about Daniel's character that we'll get into again later. And what it's suggesting about his character is that he is righteous. That righteous people, instead of the beast coming from the forest or the beast from the forest being able to devour them, instead they'll be turned into the beast from the sea. And so when Daniel is in the lion's den and the lion is unable to harm them, Daniel says, you know, the Holy One shut their mouths. They were powerless against Daniel. He had kind of turned them to water in terms of the damage they were able to do. They were weakened concerning Daniel. But the next morning, when King Darius goes and finds all the people who set Daniel up for this and throws them and their families into the lion's den, it says that the lions were able to snatch them, to bite them even before they hit the ground. I mean, while they're still falling, the lions were able to snatch them. And so it was like they're turned back into the beast of the forest. That's just to help you kind of see that how righteous people can affect where the beast comes from. And unrighteous people can also affect where the beast comes from. If you were full of injustice, if you were full of rebellion, then the beast will come from the forest or the wilderness. If you were a nation full of righteousness, if you were a nation full of justice, if you are an obedient nation, then your enemies are basically turned into sea creatures, and they are powerless to harm the righteous. And so let's go back up to the verse again, because the verse is fascinating. A lion from the forest will kill them. Did. It killed the idolaters and then took the rest captive. It talks about the leopard is watching their cities. Well, you've got the lion, you've got the bear that's truly not going to be significantly different from Babylon. But the leopard kingdom of the Greeks, they are pretty significantly different. There's some historical differences that are interesting to study if you like documentaries. But of course, the Greeks at this point, they don't have the strength yet, but they're watching. They're watching this kingdom. They're watching this regime change. They're preparing to pounce in their turn. But if you look at how a leopard stalks, that's exactly what it does. It can observe and prepare for a long period before it ever pounces. At any rate, there's a divergence here. It introduces a new creature, the wolf. It says a wolf of the deserts. And remember I think we went through this before, how the forest and the wilderness are equivalent expressions. If the creature comes from either of those places, it will be incredibly strong. The serpents and the skins, they walked in the wilderness. They were but now we're in Israel. The wolf they would be referring to is going to be it's a and the characteristics of this particular wolf. They're a little more lightweight. They resemble a coyote a little bit more because they're designed to dissipate the heat of the desert. But we want to look at why it's the wolf of the desert that's going to destroy them, along with this lion from the forest. And we've got a leopard watching. Why is the wolf inserted when we're really just trying to figure out the lion and the bear and the leopard? What's different about the wolf is it's clarifying for you a time expectation. The wolf is a time marker. So it's going to link the destruction with the evening, which is the time when the wolf hunts. And it's also going to associate it with the beginning of an exile. Because remember, the night represents the exiles, the different exiles. So the wolf who begins hunting his prey at night becomes a symbolic time marker of the beginning of an exile. And when it speaks of the morning, which is when the wolf is typically seen gnawing the bones that are left over from his prey, that signals the end of an exile. So we want to look at the proto-prophecy first. We can always go back, usually into Genesis, but anywhere in the Torah, you're liable to find what I call a proto-prophecy, a seed prophecy, a paleo-prophecy, that'll give you a guideline for the other mentions of this particular thing. So the blessing upon the tribe of Benjamin is kind of a strange one, but it helps us understand the wolf as a time marker. So in Genesis 49:27, it says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey. And in the evening, he divides the spoils. What's so interesting about this blessing is in terms of time, it's reversed. And I think there's a prophetic implication there. And I think at least one implication, we could probably come up with 70, but one implication is rather than saying in the evening, he divides the spoils of his prey, and then in the morning, he devours it. In other words, he gnaws the bones in the morning, what's left over, it's reversed. And so the end of the exile is emphasized before the beginning of the exile. The end is emphasized over the beginning. He declares the end from the beginning. But so Benjamin as a tribe, there's a prophetic aspect of Benjamin that has to do with time. And it's usually evening and morning. Evening and morning, the first day, evening and morning, the second day. Well, in Benjamin's case, it's reversed. And so the exile of the night is placed second, but the freedom from the exile is emphasized first. Okay, so we're going to look at other examples to help. We're just using that as our proto-prophecy. Isaiah 34:14. It says, the desert creatures will meet with the wolves. The goat also will cry to its kind. Yes, the night bird will settle there and will find herself a resting place. Right, if you've ever been down in the Arava at night, if you've ever been down in the desert, the wilderness, you know that's when it comes alive. In the daytime, when it's hot, everything kind of shuts down. Everything goes to shade when the sun comes and gets up in the sky. But if you want to see the desert, you need to see it at night. You need to see it in the evening, because yes, that is when the wolves will come out of their dens and begin hunting. That's when the big lizards will come out of their holes under the acacia trees. This is when the caracals, the big cats, will come out and start hunting. The foxes, will you see them in the daytime? Yeah, every now and then. But the norm is that all these creatures come out at night when it's cool. They're smarter than to stay out there in the daylight, right? All you have to do, if you want to make it down in the desert, just do whatever the Bedouin are doing, or do whatever the animals are doing. They will show you the right routine to adopt down in the desert. So these desert wolves, they'll begin moving in the evenings toward the water. They'll go get them some water first, and then they'll start finding food. And often that food is around the water, because the other animals are coming out to get water too. So the best place to find something to eat, of course, is to hunt around the springs. If you ever go down to Ain Seen with me, down to Miriam Spring, which is where Miriam was buried, but there's a beautiful spring down there, little waterfalls. It's like an oasis. And if you're careful and you're watching, you will find all sorts of animal tracks down there, because you have all the animals coming to water. And then you have the predators also following those little animals, trying to catch birds and hares, and there's all sorts of little creatures down there. Habakkuk 1:8, it says, their horses are faster than leopards and quicker than wolves in the evening. Their horsemen charge along, their horsemen come from afar, they fly like an eagle swooping down to devour. All right, quicker than wolves in the evening. The evening, again, is the hunting time of the wolf. It's a time marker. So the wolf will devour in the evening. And then in the morning, it's finishing up the meal. It's gnawing the bones that are left. Zephaniah 3:3, it says, her leaders within her are roaring lions. Her judges are wolves at evening. They have no bones to gnaw in the morning. So again, you can see that the wolf is helping you to place yourself either in the evening or the morning. So when you see these wolf illusions, then think, okay, it's probably a time marker to help me decode something around it. It'll have a context around it. And so you just help interpret that context by adding the time marker of the wolf. Evening, the beginning of the exile. Morning, the end of the exile. And actually in a lot of cultures, but especially Native American tribes who live so closely to the earth, they were real analysts of the earth's cycles and patterns. And almost without exception, Native American tribes recognized the wolf as special because they saw this wolf as symbolic of their own livelihoods. Right? As we look back here at these prophecies, we can see how the wolves are kind of indicating the times, right? If the wolf does well in the evening, then that's a good sign because there's food to be had, right? But here in Zephaniah, the prophecy was they have no bones to gnaw in the morning. It's telling you like they didn't get anything. They don't have any bones, so they're not doing well. So with the Native American tribes, what they would often do is they had a wolf pack that would typically, have its territory close to that particular tribe or clan or whatever. And the clan would watch the success or the failure of the wolf pack. If the wolf pack was on the rise, then they felt that the tribe would be able to expect good things. But if the wolf pack began to decline, they felt like there were bad things coming to the tribe. It kind of goes back to these prophecies. It's kind of a riff on this ancient evening, morning symbolism of the wolf. As this wolf goes, so will go the people. And so it's still based not just on time, but on your times of prosperity or your times of decline. And so they felt like the wolf was an important marker of their times, either to do well or to not do well. Okay, this one everybody knows. Isaiah 11:6. It says, and the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fattened steer will be together, and a little boy will lead them. Right? Obviously, this is talking about the Messianic kingdom. And now we know that a wolf is can be a time marker or a times marker. And in this case, the time of lying down, which up to this point has symbolized exile, instead it will become a time of peace. Instead of being worried about the wolf having to go hunting in the evening, instead the wolf will dwell with the lamb in the evening. Just as the lambs lie down in the evening to rest, the wolf will also be able to lie down and rest instead of having to go hunting at night. And the lamb won't have to worry about the wolf hunting at night, breaking into the sheep pens or whatever. You've got the leopard and the goat. Now remember, the leopard and the goat were the two animals that represented Greece, but the goat was a male goat, a full-grown male goat that was angry and full of rage. In the kingdom, this leopard aspect of Greece, which is of course the predator and the hunter, it's going to lie down with the young goat, the young Greece. And I think this might be hinting to us again of that old paradigm of the older serving the younger. Remember, the older was of the sixth day, goes back to 666. The older of the sixth day was the beast. The younger of the sixth day was the man. In terms of how mankind was formed. The older is going to be the body and the soul, the thing that makes us similar to a beast. But what was breathed in last was the spirit that set humankind apart. So the spirit is the younger, the older is going to be the soul, the animal soul. What's going to happen? The older soul is going to serve the younger spirit. It's taking us back to Eden, where man is going to rule over the beast kingdom in harmony. The spirit of Adonai is going to rule over the soul of man in harmony. So you've got this suggestion here, a little boy will lead them. The younger will lead these beasts. You'll get the younger aspect of Greece, right? A more spiritual Greece than this predatory leopard. They will be at peace with one another. The predator, just like the wolf and the lamb, the predator at night is going to be able to lie down with the young goat. It's going to, the predator beast will be mastered by the younger, by the spiritual principle. And it says a little boy will lead them. That's I think part of the hint here. John 10:12 says, he who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters the flock. Right, so Yeshua is much more pointed in terms of, what the rabbis were kind of reading into the night as an exile, and the wolf at night initiating the exile, or the time of the exile. Yeshua says this is exactly what happens if you have a hired hand who is not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep. He sees the wolf coming. In other words, he sees the exile coming. And instead of hanging in there with them, like say Daniel did, he leaves the sheep and flees. And that allows the wolf to snatch them, and then to do what? To scatter them into exile. So with Isaiah 11:6 and John 10:12, we can put those two together. And I think we come up with, the nutshell is, if you see the wolf coming, the exile is coming, and that the sheep will be scattered. But in the Messianic kingdom, you will see the wolf coming, and instead of scattering the sheep, instead, they will be able to lie down together. The evening will not be a time of terror at that time. It will not be a time of exile. Just like there's going to be plenty. When you look back at that prophecy of Benjamin, where did it go? Here. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey. In the evening, he divides the spoils. Remember, you kill your prey at night, you divide the spoils. Then in the morning, whatever's left, you eat that. You eat the bones up and you go on about your business. So if we put that with everything else we see about the wolf, we understand that Benjamin is telling us of a time where the wolf, as this time marker, when this time of the Messianic kingdom sets in, there will be plenty. There will be plenty. He will be ravenous in the evening, but there's going to be plenty to eat in the morning. And of course, scripture talks about how their diet will even change. That the lion and what was it? They're going to be able to eat grass, just like, regular cattle, which is pretty cool. Okay, so we're about to run out of time here. Just to kind of recap the difference, that's what I thought. A creature who comes out of the sea will weaken and die quickly. A creature that comes out of the forest is a strong creature, and it will do a lot of damage, and its empire will extend over a long period. Right. So next week, when we start going through this, we're going to break down Isaiah's prophecy here into possibly 2 time periods. From the time that the first beast arrived from the wilderness of the sea. And remember, wilderness kind of equals forest or land creature. And sea can also mean the peoples. The idea being that if you came up from the peoples, somehow that strength is scattered out there. If we look at the clay and iron feet of Rome, then you can see that that iron is dispersed among the peoples instead of being concentrated in the legs where it's strong. Instead, it once it gets out there among the peoples, then it's diluted because of the clay. So it doesn't have the same strength. So we're reading in Revelation and kind of thinking, oh, that's a terrible thing. It is a terrible thing, but it's a terrible thing for the wicked. For the righteous, the way it's being read is that as this creature comes out of the sea, as it pertains to the righteous, the strength will very quickly dissipate, and it's not going to have power, just like the dragon is going to pursue the woman into the wilderness. Why is that silly? Because the dragon should not leave, if we're talking about the crocodile dragon, the dragon should never leave the river because that's where it's strong. Instead, it follows her up into the wilderness. And then it tries to spew out a flood because remember, its strength is in water, the flood of wickedness. And that's when you see the flood, it has to do with the flood of wickedness in the nations. How Israel in the nations, or the wilderness of the peoples, could be just flooded with wickedness to the point that she's destroyed. But we see that the earth can actually swallow up that flood of wickedness and help the woman. But the woman has to maintain her righteousness. She cannot become an idolater in the wilderness, or the earth has no obligation to help her and to swallow up the wickedness. If she will maintain her righteousness, if she will be faithful to her husband, then the earth itself will help her. Because remember, the earth is the stronger. And so whereas the beast kingdoms might have been feeding off this land strength, right? If the woman is righteous, that very strength can be used on her behalf. So that's where we want to go next week when we do lesson, is it going to be 98, I guess? Okay.